and let us know where you are in the world. Hello everyone, thank you so much for sharing where you're from. Jean was really funny, half sangria, half French. Thank you so much, and we want to start now, and as people join, they can always please remember to put where you are. We're interested in knowing where we are in the world. And so thank you everyone, hi and welcome. It's great to have you here. Again, please, for people who have just joined, introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you are in the world. And it's just a few reminders. If you have any questions, read the presentation today, please write them into the Q&A instead of in the chat. That it's going to be easier for me as facilitator and also panelists to take a look at them. You can also send a direct message to me at any time if you run into any technical issues, and enjoy the session. I'm Sophia, and with this, I want to welcome you to Queralt's 2021 Summit. The session you've joined today is called Achieving Real Change Through Mass Collaboration. This session brings together multiple organizations that are looking at effective ways to achieve real change. This is a panel discussion. We want to have some interaction and we want to make it like very smooth and easy. So each speaker is going to present and we're going to have some group discussion, and we're going to be open the room for Q&A at the end. So again, please put questions in the Q&A instead of in the chat box, and we'll answer them via text, or we're going to answer them in the session at the end. This session is also broadcasted live. So this is just a quick note. If you don't want your face to be shown, you can turn off your camera. And I'm very happy to introduce the speakers for the session. I have with me Neil Smyth from Alkemio, Jean-Francois, I'm sorry, my French is not that good, Jean, Queralt from the TIOF Foundation, and Mark Frischmuth from Democracy Lab. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, everyone. And so I think we can start this session by asking, like breaking the ice and asking each of you to tell us a bit of the project that you're working on and the organization that you belong to.
Cool. Shall I kick it off then, Sophia? Yeah. Okay, cool. First of all, thanks, Sophia, for the moderation, and thanks to Queralt for the chance to join this panel discussion. Looking forward to a very good discussion with Jean and Mark. We've already had some interesting discussions in the lead up to it. So about Alkemio, I'll just show a couple of slides. I'll share my screen here if that's okay. Hopefully you can see this okay. So Alkemio is basically, it's an open platform where we can hopefully solve the hard issues that we're facing at multiple levels better. The driver is to allow society to collaborate at mass scale, so we can ultimately build a better future together. And the context, our world is changing rapidly. There are many hard issues that require a lot of people to work together to solve them. You can think of anything from energy transition, water scarcity, refugee crisis, environmental degradation, etc. The list is very long, and the list is actually growing. And that's a problem, because addressing these hard issues when multiple parties have to come together is simply not properly supported at the moment. So we're not as effective as we can be on working together and solving these hard issues. What is the issue? Where are we now? Where do you want to go to? How can I find, topics I want to contribute to? There's no GitHub for these hard issues. How can we share information about it? How do we connect to other people working on similar topics? Essentially, how can we make the collaboration on these hard issues simply much, much better, including things that sound obvious but are hard right now, like best practices on these kind of collaborations. And what we're trying to achieve with Alkemio is to change the conversation. We want to put the challenge, the change we want to achieve, what we're not happy about with current reality, in the middle, and use that as the neutral place that we collaborate around. And that starts with defining your context. Where are we now? Where do you want to go to? Who should be involved? What will the impact be? And then around that context, build up a community of people and organizations that want to contribute and knowledge, and then use that as your base for collaboration and coordination. It's a fairly simple change, but it's very fundamental and changes the dynamic, we believe, in terms of how we collaborate on these hard issues. So where are we now? So a bit about Alkemio. It's tech for good. It's all open source. It's a nonprofit foundation. You can check out our GitHub repo. We were established about 15 months ago, so we're quite new. We did release our first minimum viable product 2.5 months ago now. You can see it, you can play with it, you can sign up, hopefully, as well. You can see some initial challenges working with some of our launching partners. But it's really just the start. This is about getting the base in place, so an awful lot more is coming. And we really hope to change the conversation, change the way in which we collaborate on these hard problems. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm going to pass the mic to Mark. Oh, you're muted.
All right. Okay. Now I think I am audible, so everyone can see my screen. Great. So I'll just fly through a few slides here. Democracy Lab is a US-based nonprofit organization with a mission to empower people who use technology to advance the public good. Our vision is that someday technology will enable us to solve our most challenging social, economic, environmental, and civic problems while empowering all members of society. And our values are a couple key ones I want to touch on. We're community built, so we're built almost entirely by volunteers for volunteers. We're in tech for good projects, of which we are one. Inclusivity is a core value. We believe that everybody has something to contribute to the solutions that society needs. And then collaboration and transparency have been really key to creating the culture that we found is critical to getting things done and making progress on these difficult problems. And so the problems that we address are tech for good projects need skilled volunteer labor in order to launch. There's a cycle of futility we've observed that in order to, you've got lots of people with great ideas of how tech can help the world. To build those products, you need funding. To get funding, you need impact. And to have impact, you need a product. So it's a cycle of futility. We disrupt that cycle by helping tech for good projects launch using skilled volunteer labor. Volunteers need to upskill. We found this to be a real common motivation, and tech companies need new culture and diversity solutions. So as I said, we help tech for good projects launch using skilled volunteer labor. We help volunteers get valuable experience, hone their skills and advance their career. And we help companies deliver culture building, employee engagement, and diversity solutions. So this is the ecosystem that we serve. There's value that we create at each of these connections between volunteers and projects, between projects and companies, and between volunteers and companies. Just a few testimonials. I won't read these, but Shelter app talks about how they hit a critical milestone using Democracy Lab volunteers. Reka talks about how her experience helped her land a job. And Colleen talks about how the employee engagement event that we did for her division at Amazon helped to create a sense of purpose within their employees. It was time well spent, fun, impactful, and important. And then something we're really excited about is this upcoming public interest technology hackathon, a better techathon, October 14th and 15th, collaborating with the Public Interest Technology University Network in the US and the Code for America Brigade Network. And that is it from me. And so I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Neil, for the presentation. Thanks for having me. I'm going to do this awkward moment as well, where you need to stop everyone and then share your screen, and everyone is just waiting for you. And let's hope that you can only see what you have to see, which is my slides. Is everything fine?
We can only see the slides.
Okay, perfect. All right, so my name is Jean-François. I go by John. You can call me John. I manage an organization called the IO Foundation. We are a tech NGO, and one of the initiatives that we run is this thing called Tech Up. Tech Up starts with a very fundamental question. In what kind of world do you want to code? And the reason why we ask this question is because we identify programmers as the next generation of rights defenders. We concentrate on them a lot. And we are essentially attempting to create an ecosystem, a platform for them to be able to embrace this particular role. The reason why we are looking into programmers, even though the ecosystem has many other stakeholders, can be summarized in this slide, of which I can be talking for about 2 hours. And since I don't have the time, I'm just going to give you the link later on the chat so you can have a look at it. But essentially, in our organization, we observe a parallelism between how human rights are defined in the basis of personal harms, and the same could be applied for data. And therefore, once you have a taxonomy of digital harms and another one on digital rights, you can start putting technical descriptions into the things that you're trying to avoid, onto the harms that you're trying to avoid in technology. And of course, the people who are taking care of these are none other than programmers. And so as a result, we want to give them the tools necessary in order to be able to build, design, and implement technology that is going to be safer by design. The main objective of the whole project, as I was mentioning, is to enable programmers to embrace this role. We also bring other stakeholders, such as organizations that provide pro bono services, but also open source projects that are looking into obtain support by the community, and a number of other things that we do. So in terms of agenda activities, the whole event is run on a monthly basis, and it runs for 48 hours because we are covering pretty much all over the world. We have 4 different time zone areas: Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe, and then the Americas East Coast and Americas West Coast. And we run capacity building sessions, networking sessions, force pairing sessions where we try to pair open source projects with collaborators, and a number of other things such as UDTR working group and other activities that we are. Basically, we are having activities almost those 48 hours. In terms of topics, one of the critical things of the capacity building is that we don't look only to technical elements. We also look at soft skills and ecosystem mapping. The idea here being that if you're going to be providing technical skills and knowledge to programmers that you expect that at some point are going to be attempt to do any change, they first need to know how to express themselves to obtain that change, and also where to go to attempt to express that change. So we build capacity building sessions based on those 3 elements. Now, to characterize the importance that we see on programmers, I always come into this particular joke that I find to be one of the nerdiest jokes ever, and at the same time one of the best ones, is that I would like to change the world, but no one gives me the source code. That might not be real right for our physical world, is actually very right and very apt when it comes to technology. So if we can actually manage to change a little bit the people who are building the stuff that we are so much concerned about, and maybe we have a shot at getting better technology. Last but not least, those of you, I will put the link later. You can have access to all the TechUp guides and have a look at it. And if you have any questions, I think the three of us are looking forward to hear from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all the three of you, for this brief introduction. So we had a set of questions that we want to ask you, and I was about to ask that, but then I received a question from Soledad Magnon in the chat, which I thought was really interesting. So I would go rather with that. So she's asking, much is being talked about co-creation. Which would you say are the main differences between collaboration and co-creation? So I'm going to open the mic for whoever wants to take the lead on here.
So I certainly have a view on that. If I think about collaboration, it's people working together, creating some output on it. If you're thinking about co-creation, you're trying to really create something on that output. And the question I would have is where is the agreement, or where do you actually put the results of what is you're creating? So if you're just generic collaboration, each party maybe gets some results out of it, but you need to make sure that there is a very clear understanding of, you do co-creation beyond your own benefits from that collaboration, where do those results go? Who owns them? Who gets the benefits from them?
I guess I would add to that I think it's a little bit about the standing of the stakeholders and the depth of the engagement, that people can collaborate on almost anything, and it's just a matter of kind of working together. The co-creation, I think, is suggesting that there's that the stakeholders are sort of at their needs are being considered as being equally valuable, that they all have a vested stake in the output, and that for a solution to work, it has to meet the needs of everyone involved. So I think it's a little bit higher bar to successfully co-create something versus to collaborate on a project.
If I could add something about that, I would in fact want to hear from Soledad, what is it exactly that concerns her about the difference between the two concepts? What is the root of the question? Is it something from just a definition perspective, or has she experienced something that makes her doubt about what would be the applicable one in her situation? If you can add that on the Q&A or on the chat, that would give a bit more context on the question.
Thank you. So I'm going to put a pin there to Soledad. You can put in the chat some of your ideas, and we can follow through with that, so we can continue with that, answering what John just said. I'm going to also go into another question that we had from the audience, from Laura James, which says, the intros have all had a strong focus on code. How do you each see the roles of other skills and experiences? And it's something that I'm going to put a pin to John, because he was mentioning also in TechUp having some other soft skills and other capacity building skills rather than code. But yeah, so I'm going to leave with Laura's question. So
you concentrate on whatever your stakeholders or your expected beneficiaries are supposed to be. And in our case, we are focusing on programmers, and therefore we need to provide them with content that is going to be interesting for them. And programmers want programming, they want coding. The thing is, if you look at what's the change that you're trying to inflict or to create, there's obviously elements of soft skills that we need to incorporate. And as I was mentioning as well, the element of ecosystem mapping. Now, we are not pretending in our particular case to only involve programmers long term. So for instance, if you are looking at support to force projects, We would like eventually to be able to engage other communities such as HR community builders, or even people who are into finance management, because a lot of those projects do require this kind of support in order to, for instance, go for funding. How can you expect to go and request for funding if, one, you don't have someone who knows how to write a grant proposal to begin with, or two, you're not going to have someone who's going to be able to handle the finance and the expenditure of the project? Most people who are into first projects, that's not one of their fortes, and they could definitely benefit of this kind of support. In terms of contents, well, I go back to what I said before. Whoever is going to be your main beneficiary, you need to create content that is going to be interesting and exciting for them. Otherwise, audience is not coming. And I think we all can agree that everyone's a bit burned already of doing things online, and attracting audience is not straightforward. So you need to very much curate what you're going to be providing them.
Mark, do you want to go on this one? Will I take it next?
Oh, sure. So I actually think that with Democracy Lab, there is not that much emphasis on coders. There definitely is without coders, software products don't get built. So they do have a critical role to play. However, without everybody else, coders are very, very likely to build the wrong thing. And so what we found is that, just thinking about Democracy Lab's internal team of volunteers, not so much the teams on all of the other projects, but the coders, software developers probably make up, 10 to 20% of the total volunteer base, that there are lots of other skills that are every bit as important. So user researchers, product managers, UX designers, usability testers, people who help with marketing, people who help with Salesforce implementation, with grant writing, with project management. And we have all these different teams within our organization, all volunteer driven. And the software developers are really at the very end of that product development, that feature workflow. And without them, nothing would get built. But without everybody else, what was built wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And I see that across all of the projects that use our platform as well, is that in many cases you have, say, a technical founder who can write code on their own, but they can't do many of the other things that need to get done. In other cases, you have people who are like me, who couldn't write a line of code if they had to, but they have skills that are very valuable, and then they can recruit other people who can do the things that they can't. So a big part of it is figuring out what somebody can do and what the other skills are that are needed to complement those the founders, so that they can have a successful team and launch their product and make an impact in the world.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. And for look at Alkemio, there's actually nothing about the platform that is focused on coders. Actually, it's meant to be generic. It's meant to be any challenge, any hard issue that anybody wants to work on, and then you bring the set of people who are needed to address that challenge together, which could include coders, but by no means has to include coders at all. And in fact, the name Alkemio is actually chosen to reflect that. It's a play on the word alchemy. You need a lot of different ingredients to come together to try and create the output that you want. So, for us, yeah, of course, I shared the GitHub link because we're actually actively building it. But for the end user, there should be no particular focus on one skill set or another. Perhaps if we put a group in for change agents and people who can actually help people to collaborate, that would be an interesting group, but not particularly on coders.
Thank you. I'm also gonna, I know I'm not a panelist in this panel, but I'm also gonna contribute to the discussion, saying and this is from the experience that we have at Code for All and things that we are doing at Code for All and in previous experiences too in civic tech. Like technology is not the solution. It's just a tool to make things easier. And for that tool to actually work, you need to have a set of skills around I don't know, people who understand the needs of the stakeholders, people who work directly with stakeholders, that in some cases, for example, are more traditional NGOs that do not have this tech background, and that both sides are needed to make the project more effective and to make the tool actually achievable and to actually solve the thing that you're trying to solve. So that was just my contribution to this discussion. I saw Soledad that put a response on what John had said about co-creation is a trend and topic. So she just wanted to learn if you perceive it as something innovative or just as a buzzword with a meaning similar to collaboration. So I'm just gonna drop that line there. Also, if you want to like comment on something, I know John already put something in the chat. But I don't know, Neil or Mark, if you want to share something around that idea.
Well, I think it comes back to, again, is what happens with the results of your working together. Collaboration, you both get your own benefits. If it's co-creation, you're creating something that sits in the middle, potentially between the two of you, and you have to divide how you're going to assign the benefits of that creation.
Perfect.
I guess I would just add, I think, collaboration, people collaborate at work. They've got, you've got your job, boss tells you to do something, you collaborate on it, it's done. Co-creation to me is more, a little bit more like a negotiation where people can walk away. And so so it's what's the term I learned a while back of BATNA, what's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is kind of part of the co-creation process, is that people can walk away from it at any time if they choose to, and go off and do things on their own, create the thing that they want to in exactly the way that they envision. Co-creation is challenging because people have to be able to come together and decide that what they can create in a co-creative manner together is better than what they could do independently on their own.
Definitely. And I'm just gonna also highlight another comment that we had, not so much of a question, but a comment that I totally agree on. From Valentin, it says, I think you can easily collaborate without co-creating. A vivid example is tons of hackathons that have a focus on collaboration and not on the long-term outcome and progress of the output of the hackathon. That's something that we see a lot. Like, we have tons of hackathons and like amazing things and to solve the world problems, and at the end, like, it's really hard, nothing happens, there's not a follow-through. And I'm gonna jump to another question from Carrie, because it's something that it was also related to something I want to ask. So she asked, I would love to hear about any experience you've had measuring real change among end users of programs and software. And this links to another question that I had around impact. Have you found a way to measure short or long-term impact, and what that has been? And
you want to go first?
Start?
So I mean, if we're busy with this exact topic at the moment, is how do you actually give and first of all capture what is happening in the interactions, and then what the impact is as a result from those interactions. We are still busy designing that particular aspect of our system, but I do believe you have to make it transparent, and you have to make some way of capturing the data so you can understand it. For us, the evidence so far is very anecdotal. Someone puts a challenge up, instead of another organization going and doing the same challenge, they join into the previous challenge that's already on the platform. We've seen that a bunch of times so far. Anecdotal, but hopefully over time we can actually show a lot more data about that.
For us, I think there are things that are easy to measure and things that are much more difficult to measure. What we can easily measure are the number of volunteers who connect to a project and become contributors. That's pretty easy. We can measure the number of people who come to our events. We do Tech for Good hackathons every other month, and it's really easy to tell how many people show up and participate. But what's harder to measure are the downstream impacts. So for a project that uses our platform, they are going to be measuring their own impact, and then, or hopefully they are, and then how do that you help them accomplish. And so I think, this is in my opinion, a very difficult problem to solve. We have some interesting ideas around this, but they're, kind of on the drawing board of, we're building right now a volunteer activity reporting system. So rather than just measuring the connection, we can have a weekly report of what's happening. We are toying with the idea of that activity report sort of going into a blockchain type ledger, so that these, all of these activity reports eventually layer into a feature. That feature can be measured against the intended change in outputs, and that all of that downstream impact that later occurs can then be traced back and attributed to the individual contributions that people made. This is all a long time from now, within the next year or two or three, maybe we'd be able to do this, but it's some of the things we've been thinking about relating to this very difficult problem of measuring the downstream impact, because we really view ourselves as creating infrastructure for civic engagement, civic tech, for contributions that anybody can make to these big problems. And it's kind of that quip of, give me a lever and a place to stand, and we'll change the world. So if we're creating a lever, how do you measure the impact that has, far down the road, and all the changes that occur?
In our particular case, it's a bit more difficult. So our expected impact is very long-term. And what we have right now is a model that still needs to be validated in terms of how that impact is going to be observed. What we hope is that the people who eventually participate often enough in TechUp, and that extract the knowledge that they require from TechUp, eventually go and start participating in places such as open standard working groups, so that they can actually make changes into how those standards are being designed in the technical level. So let's say, for instance, that you are concerned about how certain biometric devices have a possible behavior that could be harmful. Well, it would be much more productive not to just have a law that says in case of harm, you can go and sue the company. It will be even much more productive. It turns out that the technical standard that regulates the implementation of such devices worldwide, which typically is what happens when it comes from a big enough research group or open standards group, does consider those by design. So that's where we want to have an observance of the impact in the future. And that's going to take a long time, because anything that has to do with education requires years. And it requires then these people to be motivated, which is another problem for technologists to get involved with civic tech. And I believe that Mark may have a very similar experience as well. I tend to say that if civic tech was so sexy, we will be selling much more tickets. Let's put it that way. And it isn't. And there are problems why it isn't sexy. There's a PR element, but there's also a problem of understanding through language, what is it that you're trying to achieve by changing technology? That is something that at this moment is very difficult for technologists to understand, because they don't have that language. And so all of those are very, very slow processes that require a lot of patience. You just have to be there, as any other long time distilling type of process, like slow cooking, if you will. And until you test at least one cycle, you can't really tell if your M&E procedure is the right or not, and then tweak it in the future. Those, I think the three of us in here are in a very long road, and it's going to take quite some time to figure out exactly how much of an impact we actually made.
And of course, we don't have a control group, right? So there's no way of saying if we hadn't done the work we did, that the outcome wouldn't have been the same. Right, so you need some kind of way to have a control group to say, actually, well, that was the change we made. All we can rely on, I think, is some, proxies for the impact that's happening, and then over time, hopefully, find some way of capturing it.
Definitely, thank you. I'm going to move a bit more to the stakeholders and users in this conversation. So I really like the fact that people are asking similar things to the things that we have thought of before. So that's great. So to follow up a bit on this collaboration, co-creation, and stakeholders discussion, which stakeholders or specific groups would you like to be in a project to co-create with this year? And it's something that Soledad is following up and asking.
Well, I'll jump in. I have been in the middle each time. So I think that if I think about the projects that we serve and the partners we collaborate with, we serve different types of projects. And I've characterized it at times as being kind of like a pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid are the social entrepreneurs, people who have an idea and they need help to launch their project. We have lots of those. The challenge is once they're successful at building their idea, they still have a long way to go before they have an impact, because they need to get adoption and build their own partnerships and everything else that goes towards that. The next level up are nonprofit organizations who are already having an impact in the world, and the tech product that they need can help them be more efficient in achieving that impact. And then the very top of that pyramid are government stakeholders who are already having an impact and in fact have a sort of coercive authority to force people to use whatever tool is being created. And they're the most difficult partners to work with, but they have potentially the greatest impact. And so what I would, and as I think about the projects using Democracy Lab, lots of that base level of civic and social entrepreneurs, fewer established nonprofits using our platform, and almost no government organizations. We've had a collaboration or two with those, but the challenges change from a sort of bureaucratic standpoint. Once you move into government stakeholders, they're more used to procuring than they are to creating, and being able to maintain something and meet all of the security requirements that they have, and all of those types of things become very challenging. So we'd like to move up that pyramid of in terms of the types of projects that we work with, because we do feel like the more we can work with government stakeholders, the straighter the path to impact will be on those projects.
All right, let me then take it. So for us, I mean, there are, so we're just, we have an minimum viable product up and live. We're looking for people who are, first of all, the public good, or have it, and a pressing need to actually make some change. Too often find people who are, doing innovation or collaboration without actually feeling real pain on it. So for us, finding people who have real pain that really want to make progress, that's a big one. I would also echo what Mark is saying, that you want people who also buy into the vision rather than buy a product. So you want people who are really trying to make that, where we're going to rather than what is available now. And we tend to bring a lot of those people together in the bundle that we call innovation facilitators. People are trying to drive change in, say, in a city or a government or some other kind of semi-public institution, and that they can sort of feel the need to drive this change and to do it in a collective way. It's a very how do you say, the people are there, but at times it's hard to connect to them, and connect them in a way whereby they really feel the urgency to make the kind of change that we think is needed on a lot of these issues.
I'm gonna do a very short follow-up there. That's the type of question that I prefer to ask to the projects that come into the platform. What is it they have that they need? When it comes to us, we have a very clear type of stakeholders between programmers, first projects, civil society organizations, and other organizations that provide some type of pro bono service for the whole ecosystem. So that is pretty much clear for us. It's more on a basis of whoever's going to come and is looking for support. How does that support translate into, and where can we go and find it?
Thank you so much. So now that we were talking about stakeholders and yeah, and especially something that Mark said around like government institutions and how to like start working with them and how do we start collaboration with them, just came to another question that I think is very related. In any mass collaboration, there's always interest at play. So how do you make sure that this collaboration is transparent and that can work to bring people together rather than force polarization? And I'm thinking on that, especially with government institutions that have very like keen and very particular interest on the game. So yeah, how do you make sure polarization doesn't happen?
Shall I take this one then? There's a little pause at the end of each question. It may be handy if you just pick one of us to throw it to Sophia. So for me, it starts with having that shared understanding, right? And defining it, really writing it down as specific as you can. Where are we now? What do we not like about where we are now? What is that vision? Where do we want to go to? What's that flag on the mountaintop in the distance? And then what will be the impact and who should be involved in getting there? A lot of times people actually don't go through the step of actually defining that, which means it's very, you don't get to that. If you like, if each person has a set of interests and the person group has a set of interests, it's somewhere in that overlap is where you can collaborate. So you have to identify where people agree and maybe capture and document where people don't agree. But you have to have that shared understanding to be able to actually effectively collaborate. And too often we see that's not there. And the other point I would mention is that it's not a static thing. Right? You need to also be willing to evolve that definition of what people's interests are and what your understanding is of that of the journey you're trying to make. Who are the types of actors that should be involved? Have you got all the right actors involved? They're kind of representing all different stakeholder groups. So it's not A building for B, but it's A and B building together for A and B. And you need to really put attention to that early on the journey and all the way through the journey. It's not a done deal. You really have to make sure it's a continuous process to make sure people's interests are aligned and that they're surfaced up.
John, do you want to go next?
No, Neil actually summarized very well almost everything I wanted to say, so I'm good. I can pass it to you. Thanks.
Okay. So I think a word that hasn't come up yet in our discussion, but came up a lot in a pre-panel call that John, Neil, and I had is trust, and that this is very important to mass collaboration working. And this is why each of our organizations have chosen, the business structures that we've chosen, the open source licenses that we've chosen, because we want to create a foundation of trust. And my belief is that transparency is a significant driver of trust. And so our default approach is that things are transparent unless there's a compelling reason for them not to be. And this is, I think, culturally very different from what we see in government, that government often views transparency as a risk. And we've seen this in some of the collaborations that we've attempted with government and in the state of Washington, is that there's this program in Seattle that was called the Innovation Advisory Council, all these civic tech initiatives partnering with industry, but they were all done in using proprietary software and then ways that only facilitated a handoff between the tech company and the city. Only one of those 8 or 10 projects was done in an open source way, and that's one that we were able to collaborate on a little bit. But it is a difference in mindset, approach, and sort of cost benefit analysis for government stakeholders to embrace transparency and doing things in an open way that invites public participation. And so I think that a challenge that we have is a cultural one, and it's a means of how we're able to work together, and that's not easy. Or it's not something that I think it's one thing to build a culture within your organization. It's another thing to encourage a transparency or a culture of transparency within, say, projects using your platform. To create culture change in government is a Herculean undertaking, but one that I think we have to try and chip away at little by little over time.
And I'm going to take one of your words there and just throw a little bit more onto it. Transparency, completely agree. But that also comes down to transparency as to what are the agreements between the different parties. If you have many different types of parties, which are by definition needed to solve these hard issues, you need to make sure that you have a very clear understanding, shared understanding between all parties, that these are the principles we agree with. This is what happens to any data. This is what happens to any results that comes out. This is how we resolve a dispute. And that has to be explicit, and that anybody who joins in that particular endeavor actually agrees to them to be part of the community. And that gives you some way of actually almost self-selecting who's going to be aligned with you. And then you can refer back to that, governance, if you like, principles or agreements to actually keep people aligned as you go on that journey.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And we're almost running out of time, so I'm gonna ask a last question that it's a very romantic one, actually. So I would like for you to describe in your idea of how an utopia looks like, and how in utopia, I'm gonna take over what Soledad said around this concept of like co-creation and collaboration. What does the utopia looks like in your world, in your imaginary? The one who wants to start first, please go ahead.
Come on, Mark, go for it. I don't think you have been going first in too many.
All right. So first let's start with dystopia, which feels like where we're headed. And this is, I think, something else that came up in our conversation is that the world is driven by the capitalist economic system now, and which prioritizes profit. Negative externalities often are very profitable, but they create these wicked problems that we now face: climate change, inequality, structural racism. Lots of very, very difficult problems to solve that don't have obvious profitable solutions. If they did, capitalism would be great at addressing them. However, it's critical for humanity to address these problems, and so the utopia for me is that rather than we have the capitalist system that solves profitable problems, and then we have sort of the capitalist philanthropic complex, so to speak, where somebody makes billions of dollars launching a tech company, creating all kinds of negative externalities in the process, and then they start a foundation and they use some portion of the money that they made with their giant company, then sprinkling benefits out to the world, oftentimes by saying, here's a bunch of money, let's hire the best and brightest people in the world, use all the data we can find, and have this top-down approach to generating solutions. Philosophically, and practically, what I think is much more likely to achieve successful outcomes is empowering everyone to have a voice in co-creating solutions. A very bottom-up strategy that makes everyone a stakeholder and gives everyone an opportunity to contribute whatever skills or perspective they have towards being some small part of the solution, and that all of us working together are more likely to come up with effective solutions than the top-down approach of the philanthropic or even the governmental systems are able to, at least to date.
I would say that utopia looks to me as as if I could shut down the IO Foundation and not need it anymore. That's what I think most organizations should strive to. You identify a problem, you get to fix the problem, you don't need it anymore, move to the next thing. And I would that would be very much like Utopia would look like to me, where technology is just taken care for, it's properly implemented, people don't have to worry about it, at least in the same degrees as they don't have to worry about whether a car is safe or not. It's a very interesting cognitive dissonance that I observe in most industries. The degree of complexity to build a safe car or to manufacture a very big and pretty building, the amount of energy and security invested into that goes absolutely unappreciated, because it has become a regular thing for us to walk into a building and make sure that just press into a button, the elevator is coming, takes you to the 25th floor, and we have no idea about the complexity that entails. And we have systems in place to make sure that all of those stuff are not only designed but implemented, but also maintained in a way that makes me not need to care. When it comes to technology, we are far from there, and we still expect people to be nothing short of a hacker and to pursue the same equivalence. We are looking into, every time I get into a new building, I need to get a master's degree just to make sure the building is not going to collapse on my head. That is the dystopia part that Mark is describing in my particular vision of things. And I really hope that one day I don't even need to be in panels. And I can just go in the prairie and spend days on the sun and not having to concern about any of this crap, because it is crap. I mean, let's put it names into how it is. Technology should be better and should be more protective, and just unfortunately it isn't. So there we go.
Cool. Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Mark. For me, I've picked up on a few different conversations recently, the message that unless we learn to collaborate better, which is SDG 17, UN Sustainable Development Goal number 17, that we're going to continue to struggle with solving the other UN SDGs numbers 1 to 16. And so for me, utopia is that we really, really make a step change in our ability, our collective ability to solve all the hard issues, and there are many, facing our society. And that happens in a way whereby people are not doing it because they're told to do so, or become some organization instructs them to do so, but they're doing it because they want to do so. So that people are connecting into the topics they care about, so that it's much more visible to them where they can make a contribution. It's much clearer to them how their contributions are used, and that they can actually also bring other people in as needed to help address those particular topics. So if you like a purpose-driven social network where people are putting into the topics and moving forward the topics that are important to them, rather than our more, how should I put it, attention-seeking sort of type social networks like now, like your Facebooks and all that kind of stuff, that we really sort of bring the power of everybody together to actually address these hard problems, and that they can do it in a way where they're intrinsically motivated to do it or feel they need to do it. So then we can actually address, get better at number 17 so we can do numbers 1 to 16.
Definitely, thank you. And John, I really like your idea and your utopia. I would love to be in a prairie and not having to also focus on this. But no, it's totally I think we don't see it that way. We just give for granted. You go into a building and you say yeah, of course this is not going to fall into my head. Definitely. Thank you so much. We just reaching out the end, and I want to thank you and I want to thank participants for the discussion. It was really interesting. I'm really thankful for the conversation that it developed, and that developed in the chat. We have had quite a conversation around collaboration and co-creation, which is great. So just a few notes. Well, thank you so much, Neil, John, and Mark. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. And so before we leave, I'm going to put some things in the chat, but I'm also going to read them out loud. But you're going to be able to find a recording of this panel in our YouTube channel. And if you like what you saw today, and if you're interested on joining the Code for All community, you can join in our Slack space. You can find an invitation in the chat. And also, but last but not least, is if you want to receive also some updates, we have a newsletter. In there, we share things about what the community does, about what our members are doing, what the organizations and projects that we're working on. So you can sign up for the newsletter there. And also, well, we are trying to make this space as best as engaging as possible. So we appreciate your feedback a lot. And we still have, this is the first day of our summit. We still have a lot of sessions for the next following days. So check out our webpage and check out the agenda, check out the YouTube channel where we're going to be uploading all of the sessions. And we also have some asynchronous videos from projects that from around the network and from several organizations. So take a look at that. And thank you so much for today. We're going to be seeing you soon. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Sophie, for your moderation, and to Mark and Jean. It's been fun.
Yes, thanks for having us.